Yeah, you did too, right? That's a nice. Yeah, I like those.
Sean, can you?
We're gonna give you a trivia question. In actual terms, biggest environmental impact of the. Okay, number two. It's actually thermal emissions to the lake. As. Well, think about it.
Big fish, big fish.
Yeah.
Little soft.
Lot of surveys done in the outfalls on benthic and bottom feeding invertebrates and in fact on the indigenous whitefish industry.
Oh, Sean, it shows your video's on, but your lens must be closed.
It's nice and warm.
Sorry to read.
I like it. It's warm.
And sometimes in
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Kincardine at 5 o'clock on December 11, 2024 in the council chambers at the Municipal Administration Center. Roll call this evening. We have Deputy Mayor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Blackwell.
Present.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
present,
Councillor Hinchberger.
present,
Councillor Prenger.
Present.
Councillor Steinoff Gray. Councillor Stewart.
Present.
Councillor Williams.
Present.
And I would like to acknowledge the folks we have online and our staff members here as well. Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. As representatives of the municipality, we have been entrusted to act as stewards for the community in which we live and work. We recognize the importance of learning the full history of this land, our place within its long story, and our responsibility as treaty peoples. I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nations and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We deeply appreciate the contributions that Indigenous people have made and continue to make, both in caring for this land and strengthening our communities and respective nations. As a public service organization, we are committed to actions that move us towards a journey of truth, healing, and reconciliation with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, the Métis Nation of Ontario, and the historic Saugeen Métis.
All right, before we get into the agenda of the meeting tonight, I'd just like to advise council and public that we will be moving into a closed session at 6:30 this evening. If we're not done at open session, we will still have to defer to closed, and then we will finish the open session following that closed meeting. Are there any amendments, additions, or deletions to or from the agenda this evening? I'd like to remind council members to disclose pecuniary interest now or as it arises through the meeting and the general nature. Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you, having consulted with the Integrity Commissioner, this is one of those like transparency statements. So having consulted with the Integrity Commissioner, I was to publicly disclose that my spouse is an employee of Bruce Power, which has a pecuniary interest in item 6.1A, property tax implications related to non-market valuation of electricity industry properties. The Integrity Commissioner has concluded that any deemed indirect interest I might otherwise have arising from my spouse's employment would be an interest in common with electors in general, and so I may participate fully in council deliberations on the matter so long as I make this transparency statement.
So I need a mover and seconder that the minutes of the council meeting held on November 25 and November 27 be adopted as printed, moved by councillors Hinchberger and Williams. All in favor? And that's carried. Delegations and presentations. CAO, would you like to speak to this to begin with? And I would be happy to read the list of employees we're acknowledging.
Absolutely. Yeah, so just briefly, we do take time to acknowledge employees who have been here. So part of our policy is to recognize folks who have been here for increments of 5 years. We've changed things a little bit. We've had it in the past at a Christmas events, but not everybody can attend Christmas events. So we're doing things just a little bit differently, acknowledging them at council in a public setting, but also having a breakfast for folks tomorrow morning. So that's a little bit of a change and why I would be happy for the mayor to read out the names of those employees and our volunteer firefighters.
So employees that have been on the municipal staff for 5 years being congratulated for 5 years of service are Jed Blake, Jessica Cato, Leanne Gowing, and Paul Cairns. 10-year certificates go to Crystal Murphy, Fran Van Royen, Alan Hill, and Josh Campbell. And 25-year certificates go to Anna Cascone and Chris Hartwick. Within the Fire and Emergency Services Department, we have a number as well. 5-year certificates go to Travis Curran, Bill Dudgeon, Sean Jackson, and Taylor Wilkie. 10-year certificates to Kyle Jenkins, Matt McKenzie, and Shane Watson. 15-year certificates to Mike Drake and Craig Palmetier. And 20-year certificates to Paula Turner and Keith Virtue. And on behalf of council, I would like to congratulate these people too. Employees continue to be the valued resource in our municipality, and we will continue to acknowledge the good service and work that we receive from them. Okay, online tonight we have Christine McDonald and Aaron Stock, who will be presenting on the Bruce County Investment Services Report. Ms. McDonald and Aaron. Oh yeah, Aaron. Hello there. Glad you're here tonight, and offer you the microphone.
Thank you, Mayor Craig. Through you, hello to all of council and staff and those that are watching or present in the room with you. We're pleased to be here tonight to talk with you about the investment in local services work that we have undertaken. And I'll just start with a brief introduction and then turn things over to Aaron to talk about the work that did take place. It is an important pillar coming out of our strategic plan for Bruce County for 23 to 2026 to work on our community partnerships and collaborate on innovative service delivery with our municipal partners. And so we do want to ensure that we're understanding and reviewing what practices we have in place so that we can continue to develop and implement policies and initiatives that promote the public and partner engagement, as well as the delivery of services across the county. So we're really focused on service excellence, being responsive, having good governance, and financial sustainability that would be of interest to our other local municipal councils as well too. And so in working collaboratively with our municipalities, we thought this was a great place to start. And I'll turn it over to Aaron to talk about what we did in our investment in local services report and review.
Great. Thanks, Christine, and through you, Mayor. I'm not sure if you have the slide deck up or if it's just in council packages. I'll give slide references as I go through this. So on slide 3, you'll see what the background and purpose was of the work that we were doing. So what we wanted to do was start to look at answering 2 distinct questions in the work that we were doing. One, is Bruce County delivering services in an efficient fashion, and how are we delivering those services across the communities that we serve? So we looked at 2022 financial information returns, as well as 2022 volume of service data from Bruce County. The reason it's the 2022 data is there's a delay in getting fully published financial information returns from the ministry. So it was the most recent data set we could find. You'll see that Bruce County collects $56.5 million in total levy contributions, while we make $121.5 million investments in local services. I want to be clear, this is our operational investments. This doesn't factor in capital investments. I'll talk about that a little later on. And we were able to do this because we're able to leverage provincial and federal funding at the county level, as well as economies of scale. So maybe I'll get the next slide. And so, as I said, there was a couple of questions we wanted to answer. The first question being, is Bruce County efficient in the services that we deliver? So we compared ourselves with other upper tier county level governments that are consolidated municipal service managers within the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus. So when I say consolidated municipal service managers, I mean they operate Ontario Works, housing, paramedicine, all of those kinds of programs. And what you'll see from this graph is that out of those 6 comparator municipalities, county governments, Bruce County had the second lowest expenditures of the 6. We also received the lowest funding from the provincial and federal governments for the services that we deliver. And despite that low provincial funding compared to our peer group, we were still able to maintain a levy impact that's the second lowest of that comparator group of municipalities. I'll take the next slide. Maybe I'll just make one more comment on that, which is to say, we think that really shows how carefully we manage the municipality and make sure that we're providing high value and efficiency for what we're delivering. The next question we really wanted to answer is, how does that investment show up in the local communities that we serve? And so what you will see is each municipality is shown by the proportion of households it has within the county. So how the tax levy is assessed, what its levy contribution is to the county, and what percentage of services the county invests in each of those municipalities. So this is how much library service there is there, paramedic calls, Ontario Works caseload, housing units, all of those kinds of pieces. And so you'll see from this slide, Kincardine has about 15% of the households in Bruce County. It contributes about 18% of the levy in Bruce County, and it sees about 15% of the services delivered by Bruce County. This is the first year that we've undertaken this. So this is really about starting the conversation of what this looks like across the county, and starting this conversation with local councils. Maybe I'll take the next slide. We deliver this service. We deliver these services through a range of activities that include transportation and environmental services, human services, paramedic services, long-term care, the museum, the Bruce County Public Library, our planning and development services, the community development office that we've recently created, and the government relations division that we recently created. There's additional slides. I won't talk through them. There's additional slides that outline some of the details of each of those services, but I'll stop there, and Christina and I are both happy to take any of the questions you may have regarding this.
Aaron, Christine, thank you so much for the presentation. Are there any questions from council members regarding invest in community services? Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. If we go back to the slide that was showed levy contributions, you know, the one I'm referring to in there, the differences here. I wonder, did that take into account the population differences between the counties involved? And is that a possible explanation for why the County of Bruce would be down at the lower end of all three of those measures?
It used household counts for as the kind of the population level indicator there, because those household counts are reported in the FIRs, and also are how tax levy is assessed in terms of the assessed value of households.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. That was partly my question too, because, you know, geographically, we have to be one of the larger counties, and the infrastructure of roads and bridges and everything else are probably high. I'm a little disappointed hearing that they do households versus another factor, and I'd be promoting saying, come on, guys, you're going to have to do geographical area too in the infrastructure in that area, especially when you're looking at provincial and federal funding. Thank you.
Suppose thinking through that, as Aaron commented, the tax levy is not per person, it is per household, per residential or commercial lot there. So anyway, seeing no further questions, thank you so much for the report. We do appreciate it. It gives another touch point on the services that the county provides to the municipality, and our role in supporting those. So thank you very much. We do appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to 6.1A, property taxation implications related to non-market valuation. So we welcome this evening Peter Fries, who is the consultant we use through MTE. We do appreciate the work that you've done so far. And Jolene, do you want to begin the discussion just to set the stage? Thanks very much.
Happy to. Thank you, Mayor. To council, there was a desire to take a look at the regulations and the context in which the municipality receives property tax payments from the Bruce Nuclear Generating Site, to make sure we understood, because we were seeing a few things shifting, and it is rather complicated. So we engaged a consultant to help with a study. So they've looked historical, or they've looked at our history and done a historical review of the property tax and the assessment situation that we have here. And the study helped to demonstrate what we found to be actually a pretty significant shift in the tax burden from that particular property over onto other property classes within the municipality. So understanding that was a really important step for us, so that we could get a better handle on it and think about what we might want to do next. Mr. Fries is here today, and he's going to go through the results of that study and share that and be available to answer any questions that council might have.
Mr. Fries, thank you for being here tonight. Podium's yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to council. Appreciate your time. I'm going to share my screen. Make sure I click the right button and not exit. I will attempt to be as efficient as possible. There are some sort of complicated concepts. Tried to pare it down and make it as simple as possible. My apologies if there are still some complexities left in here. So, as the CAO said, Kincardin's hosted Bruce nuclear generating plants, which represent really significant infrastructure. Not just in Ontario, but certainly on a national scale. And these plants and the broader industry do have a significant impact on the local economy, including the municipality and its property tax base. And as mentioned in the introduction, we were engaged to examine the historic patterns and trends around this. What is happening? There was a pattern of decline, or there was a suspicion of a pattern of decline, a generally observed pattern. So we were engaged to look at what's driving that. And it has a lot to do, and you're hearing me talk about this, there's some specifically prescribed non-market valuation. And if you read the report, it's got a horribly long title. But we have some non-market value. So while your home is valued based on a market value, there's some other things going on with these properties. So just give you some context. When we talk about Bruce Power within this presentation and the study, we're looking specifically identifying 5 roll numbers, a group of properties. Bruce A, Bruce B, which they're commonly known, and then there's a Bruce Common, which is some services and commercial aspects that serve both those facilities, and then there's some ancillary properties. We identified actually 6 roll numbers. These are specifically identified in a special regulation, so that's why we've combined these. There are other hydro industry properties, but when we look here, this is 2024. It shows you the assessment, the current value assessment assigned to these properties. It totals just under $200 million. In terms of the county levy, about 1.4 million through Kincardin's own rates. So your local levy that you set as a local councillor, about just under 2.5. And then there's an additional amount that we'll talk about tonight that is raised using provincial education rates, but is actually local revenue for these properties and properties like it. It is part of your entitlement. So there is an education or amount raised using education rates, but it's actually local revenue. So, for the total, municipally levied portion, there's about $6 million. In addition, there is an additional levy on these properties, almost $8 million that is, we won't go into the complexities of it, but it is derived from the assessment. And it's an alternate assessment or a shadow assessment that exists in the background under provincial regulation. And based on that shadow assessment, the people paying the taxes or the PILs for that property are actually paying an additional amount that exceeds the amount that is coming to the municipalities. That goes to the financial corporation or the stranded debt of Ontario Hydro. So there's everything to the left of that divider line here, that is raised by the municipalities. This is non-municipal payments that are somewhat attached to the assessment of the property, but not the assessment you tax on. So we talked about a broad trend of relative decline. This graph shows the share. So this is own purpose and local retained education. This is the share of your local Kincardin's municipal revenue derived from all property, the percentage raised from Bruce Power rolls. And it's declined from 2008 year end to almost 50% to down into the 18% range. So over 55%, their share of municipal revenue has dropped. Now, this is not only attributable to the unique assessment protocols and regulations that apply to the property, but that is a significant part of it, which is what we were looking at or looking for and have confirmed that it is this special assessment. So when we talk about prescribed assessment treatment, your levy is distributed based on the amount you choose to raise in your council chambers and the amount of assessment, total assessment, that is available to you on the assessment roll is returned by MPAC every year. You take that levy requirement, you divide it by the assessment, you come up with a rate. A little more complicated than that, but that's how it's distributed. And it gets distributed back to the individual properties on rates. These CVAs or assessments are periodically updated, reassessment, to keep them fairly current with market value. We are in a pause now, but our system is based on regular updates where we are saying we're going to estimate the value of your home at 2012 and then 2016 and then update it again so we can keep the balance fair. But many of the key properties associated with Bruce Power and other electricity industry properties are valued in a different way. They're valued on a unit value approach that doesn't change with the market. So we have special rules for these properties. Many of them, including the Bruce Power rules, are technically exempt from property tax, but are subject to prescribed payments that mimic property tax. And we do it the same way, we bill it the same way and calculate it the same way. So all the equipment is exempt. That's normal though. So if you owned an automotive plant, your plant, the building, the foundation would all be accessible and taxable, but the assembly line would not. So that's not, it's especially identified for these properties, but it's not unique within the system. What is unique is that the buildings that house that equipment are not assessed based on what one might pay for it on the open market or what it might cost to build it, but on a pure unit value of assessment, 86.11 per square meter. That's it. So we measure the building. And for most electrical buildings, that's the inside ground floor. And that is important because when we measure the inside ground floor of a property, we're not accounting for vertical height, which is okay in some electrical properties, but in more complex ones, we're missing a lot of the cost and expense and value of the building. Not only that, 86.11 per square meter is extremely low, and it hasn't been changed in decades. So the land and buildings used for administrative use, commercial, they're supposed to be valued in a similar way to taxable property on market. And then there's certain lands used for transmission of electricity, so rights of way, which are taxed on an acreage. And that's actually the same whether they're, doesn't matter who owns them, that's the same for private and public. But there's special rules for nuclear generating stations. These kind of refine those other rules. They tell us how we're going to measure the area for the per square meter, and it's an exterior rather than interior footprint. And we're not, again, measuring any of those internal floors or layers. There's also a prescribed methodology for the water intake, which are really large, significant portions of these properties. These are site and building specific. I wanted to mention this because the regulations do not contemplate future nuclear sites. So what I'm talking about tonight applies to existing nuclear generating stations, mainly Pickering, Darlington, Bruce. It doesn't apply to anything that's added. It is building specific. So if it's not there, we're not sort of capturing it and the specific rules. So for the Bruce generating, we could break it up. If we take those assessments that I showed you, we break it up, we turn it around into the types of assessment methodology, our core generating, our water intake, our common elements, which are partially on a unit value, and then our elements are supposed to be market. And this is a bit of a snapshot of how these have changed over our observation period, which ran from 2008 year end to 2024 roll return, or basically when you set your rates for 2024. The generating have actually gone down a tiny bit. We would expect that if measurements have changed only, but there is a tiny bit of land in there that could have adjusted. The water intake has not, it's remained virtually flat. It's not increased. This is something we didn't expect, even with the current regulations. This is supposed to be indexed. So that is something we want to look at. It's a bit of a separate investigation, though. It's not part of this core policy issue that we're talking about tonight. The common areas, we see that these ones that we're supposed to increase have been fairly flat in comparison to your non-hydro or non-electricity industry properties in the municipality. So over this observation period, your regular homes and businesses that aren't subject to any special assessment have gone up 118% because of reassessment market value changes. These properties as a group have only gone up about 18%. So that's 1/10 of the rate. What happens? Oh, they've gone up a bit, but not much. What happens when we freeze assessment within a mobile system? So in other words, they're not changing a lot or they're staying the same. Why would that be problematic? That's problematic because they become in a state of relative decline. Very simple picture here. If we have $100,000 and it's 25% of your base here, and it stays $100,000, even though it stayed the same in dollars, as a percentage of base, it's going to decline over time as the rest of the base increases. And because taxes are distributed based on your shares of assessment, that $100,000 in CVA is going to be carrying less and less tax over time. And when we look at the a little bit more year specific in terms of how assessment shares have progressed, this is how things have moved. The blue columns are your taxable properties, non-electricity properties. And the red are your Bruce generated properties. What we can see is on this graph, it's impossible to show how any movement pretty much because it's just not that fine grained, but it is in relative decline, significant relative decline. So that's what's going on with the assessment because of those fixed valuations and some bleed through of those fixed valuations potentially to other elements of the property that aren't being updated at the same pace. The real issue, though, is what does that do on the tax share side in terms of taxes being distributed? Now, our study, and it's interesting, we've been asked about this every time we present it. We're not just looking at, hey, how have things changed overall? We did break down into extreme, sort of excruciating detail what shifts were related to those unique assessment methodologies compared to growth-driven change and municipal levy change, because you've had inflationary pressures, you've grown over time, which means that taxes have changed for more reasons than one. The big one is the growth that seems to be a red flag. Other properties have come online. You've built new homes, new businesses, businesses that may even be derivative of the electricity industry. And as those come on, they do shrink the share. So we want to be fair and transparent and say what is just related to the the tax change driven by those market discrepancies, where we have market values in most of our properties and non-market values in Bruce generated. This is a roll up. It's a little tough to roll these numbers up, but when we add every year's shift, so these aren't unfortunately cumulative. these are just every year's individual shifts added together. And once you shift, that's the gift that keeps on giving, and then you start a new position. So these numbers could be higher if we looked at it a different way, but we went fairly conservative on this. These are the shifts specifically driven by the by the valuation issues that we're looking at. More importantly is the difference in the market in the share of the tax. Because when we look here at municipal levy change, taxes are increasing. We have inflationary pressures. They're always going up. So we can't just say taxes have changed or not changed because there's that inflationary pressure. Share is a really good way of looking at whether things are staying the same or changing. Far better than absolute dollars. And when we look at the share of municipal levy, just your own municipal levy, using your concordant rates that you set in council chambers from 2009, and this is really 2008 year end, we've gone from 18.5% down to 11.6. So it is decreased incredibly over time. This is a bit of a tough graph, a little dense, but you can see that the main drivers here consistently are those market shifts. That is what's made the huge declines. And that is actually why it's leveled off a bit in these last couple of years, in that we have we have no reassessment. So we're not seeing those sort of dichotomy in market shifts. We also have retained education. This is a bit of a background, but retained education is an important part of your entitlement. I talked about it earlier. It is raised from your assessment on the plant and the provincial education rates regulated province-wide, but it is local revenue. It has declined more dramatically than the locally driven rates or locally rate-driven revenue, because it is those provincial rates have come down and no levy change has been put in. So every year your rates come down in a reassessment, but you put them back up a bit to take care of levy change. So the big picture, what's happened is you've ended up with almost constant revenue in a dollar perspective from these properties. But that's only because they've picked up some of your levy increase. They've shared in a portion of your annual inflationary change. So we've actually shifted from more of that pool of revenue that was coming from the retained education. As it's declined, that loss has eaten up your municipal levy change, plus the factor of the valuation decreases or relative valuation decline. You've come down for these shares, again, up near 50% of your locally levied revenue down to around 20%. Significant attrition in terms of the contribution. This is there's been overall decrease. There is kind of no two ways around that. I think everybody we've presented these results to understands them. The big issue is now going forward, we're not going back and saying, hey, somebody owes you this money or it should have been billed at that. But the forward-looking issues are quite concerning. We know what happens and we know what the result of this special regulated fixed assessment is. It strips the share of revenue being carried by Bruce Power. It declines over time. It's going to decline. It declined on every reassessment. It's going to decline in the future. Market change across your broader base was approximately 80%. If we did one giant reassessment update and went from 2008 to 2020, which was the end of the last cycle, 3 updates was about 80%. Right now, based on market analysis that was done in the spring, I believe these sales 23, 24 market data captured up to about March of 2024. The next reassessment is going to probably be double in magnitude than the last three combined. It will be, 10 times the last reassessment on its own. The last reassessment on its own saw about a 10% change. This is our market gap. So if we were to theoretically reassess today and these numbers held true, we would be looking at a general reassessment where properties were going up, let's say 150%, but even conservatively, because these are mainly residential sales, which are going to be a little higher, let's say 100%. At 100% reassessment change, just rough models suggest that 50%, another 50% decline from where you're at now in terms of Bruce Power's share of the local revenue. That would all be shifted onto other taxpayers. So the status quo is problematic for Kincardine and any municipality with significant electricity industry assessment that is subject to these regulated provisions. Sort of some of the big key takeaways from this is that there has been a persistent decline in tax share. And this is driven mainly by those non-market valuation models. We have some growth-driven shifts in terms of, more houses that are taking up a bigger share as they get built. But really, it is those non-market valuation models. When we look at this data, if you read the study, you will notice that there's levy increases. Those are municipal inflationary changes. Those are your spending pressures. Those are carried equally by everybody. They do not offset the shifts. In many ways, they kind of aggravate them in some ways, in that your other taxpayers are carrying more of those over time as those declines happen with reassessment. So, the new market value, when it comes, and it has to come at some point, it's not coming quickly, but at some point it needs to be addressed. So, just a couple closing statements. It is critical to confirm that the challenges are related to provincial policy. Nothing in our study suggests somebody's doing something wrong or counter to those policies. So, for example, we're not in any way saying Bruce Power is not paying what they should be paying, or that the assessment is wrong or something like that. We're saying that the rules that make those things right are wrong, if that makes sense. It's a policy issue that needs to be changed. I don't know that anybody thought far enough ahead that if you set a unit value assessment and you never update it, what's going to happen? But this is what's going to happen. And it is a little interesting to note that we have two types of unit value assessment in Ontario, one for electricity properties, one for pipelines. The pipeline unit value assessments have been updated to stay current or relatively current with market value change at every reassessment, where the electricity is not. So there's some provincial policy work issues here. So I think that's it. Again, I tried to be as efficient as possible. I know there's a lot of technical jargon in there. I can keep the slideshow up for a moment in case anybody wants me to revisit any slides there.
Mr. Flyers, thank you so much for that presentation. Again, we had seen some of that prior, and it was good to be refreshed. I'd like to echo his comments that this is not an issue with Bruce Power. Absolutely not. In fact, Bruce Power has been very supportive in acknowledging the challenges we're facing and have offered the assistance that they're able to. It's not even an issue with OPG. It's not the point. It is the regulation that OPG is following, provided by provincial policy. And I'd like to offer a chance for our CAO to indicate some of the strategies that staff have undertaken, the advocacy work, the team that they're putting together to present this issue to the federal or to the provincial government.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Fries. We appreciate the presentation. And yes, it is a complicated and complex topic, but I think when you get right down to it, your last sort of comments are fair. It's a provincial policy issue, and it is related to having a static value where everything else is changing and usually increasing, that then shifts the burden on to those other properties. So that's where we're seeing the challenge, and that's where we can foresee a pretty significant challenge with a new reassessment. So yes, we have had conversations to make sure that folks are aware of the issue. We have had conversations with our local MPP. We have had conversations with the Canadian Association of Nuclear Host Communities. We've had conversations with Ministry of Finance staff. We've also met with the Minister of Energy as well as some of the Minister's office staff. And we have shared it with a number of municipal treasurers who have also got similar types of impacts within the province. And most recently participated in a call with CANIC as memberships as well to highlight the issue with Ministry of Energy. So we continue to make sure people are aware. Sorry, apologies. We have had the conversations, as the mayor mentioned, with Bruce Power staff. And as he noted, they are supportive of assisting us where they can and advocating for some provincial change, as well as OPG, who understood the issue and really note that they are following what is within the framework. So it is a provincial policy issue. And that's essentially what we have uncovered, and we think it's reasonable to be asking for a review and a potential change of this as staff. Anything I'm forgetting on that front?
No.
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Any questions from council members? Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Excuse me. Through you, Mayor. One of my questions relates, like, there's obviously a separate element for nuclear, but there's also a lot going on right now in terms of siting of potential new electricity generating in terms of battery storage or additional different kind of generation. Is that going to be impacted as well? Like, so is that, I guess what I'm saying is, of course, there's the nuclear element, but I'm wondering if other communities are also going to be facing this as well, if they are citing electricity industry properties with the new procurement process.
Is that, Mayor, is that question for me?
Well, it's certainly not for me. So let's you have a whirl at it and see where we end up. Okay.
Just wanted to double check through you, Mayor. So right now the regulations, there's nuclear, but similar regulations apply to anything where there is electrical generation and transformation. Those buildings would be valued on the square meter, the fixed square meter. As they bring in some news, there's some kilowatt charges for things like wind. So as new technology, I'll call it, I don't know how new it is, but new technology or new becomes pervasive, they are regulating that separately and a little bit differently. But yeah, anybody with a certain power generation or transformation buildings that fall under that Electricity Act are captured by this. But some of the newer stuff, if you're looking at battery storage for the storage and later transmission of electricity, I don't know whether that would be considered transmission. They might have to deal with that specifically in new regulations.
I know when staff was doing some of the initial research, I think it was 70 some odd communities that had some financial effect. Like, it was a really significant number. Kincardine is by far the most highly affected. The city of Toronto, down to some communities where it's like $18 a year difference it makes. But Councillor Inchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation tonight. I don't know if my question is for you or the CAO or both, but in trying to get a clear picture on the policy changes. I realize that the current provincial government has a majority, but it looks like some of the policy changes that would be required are both in the Assessment Act itself and the generating facilities regulation under it, and whether that makes a difference in the timeline in terms, because the regulation could be passed, whatever, by the Ministry of Finance, but the Assessment Act changes would have to go through the legislature. So I'd just like to kind of know what the journey ahead's going to look like. It's easy just to say policy change, but we got different types here. So
Maybe through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll speak to that first, but I would be happy to have Mr. Fries jump in as well. Yes, you're correct. I think the ask for us has not been so focused on what we think should happen. It has been more about, this is what has happened to date. We see inequity in this, and we think that treatment should be more, that inequity should be addressed, and there should be a fairer treatment. So however that policy change, and it could come through regulation, it could come through, there's probably, probably multiple ways things could be addressed. I think that the request to the province is more, you should be the ones to figure out how to address this, to make sure that there's a fair treatment within the property assessment system that you govern. And if it's okay, I'll ask Mr. Fries if he has more to offer on that.
Through you, Mayor, there would be some regulatory changes, but there would also be some legislative changes actually in the Electricity Act, where some of this is prescribed and the treatment of these is adjusted. But to reiterate what the CA said, my personal feeling on the strategy is to say identify what needs to be done, not prescribe what should be done, because then you get into a debate on that and it can get side railed as an initial step.
thank you for that. I personally don't really care how it gets fixed. But you know what I'm trying to say.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. Peter, that's an excellent report. I think this is about the 10th time that I've gone through it, and every time I get more information from it. So you and your company deserve a lot of credit. It really explains to the average person what's going on. And basically, we've been subsidizing the power generation for the rest of the province in our own little community here of 12,000 people. And my best guess, and this is only my best guess, looking at the shortage where we used to be 18.6 share and now we're 11, you're looking at around $2 or $3 million of shortage. This becomes a political factor, and it's great to talk about regulation and moving the government. It'd be nice just to go down there and ask them to write us a check for a while until they figure this thing out, but I think that's not going to happen. But it looks like unless we, and I think the staff has been trying to work through the various departments in the provincial government, the energy, finance, and our local MP, but I think we're going to have to go public, and we're going to have to put on a little demonstration, because you understand that there's election next year, and that's the time to really step into it. I think the impact people are going to be asked not to probably do a reassessment until after the election, but that would be the appropriate time in 25 that we could really make headroads and maybe change the whole thing, or get someone to write us a check, one or the other. But thank you, great report, and I hope that we're going to get an answer back in 25. Thank you.
Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, I'll put forward a few of my own comments. The first is that I'm glad that we can finally have this conversation in public and take it to the public. It's something that I have always found frustrating when we have residents that are very vocal and express it feels like my taxes are going up and I'm getting less and less for them. And meanwhile, this staff report has been coming through and sitting through and been worked on that very clearly shows one of the major reasons why that is a reality here. It's very easy to explain how housing prices go up, and that a power generation station is essentially frozen in time at $8 a square foot in 1967. So we were talking a little bit about this, and everyone seems to agree that the fix has to come from the province. We can't change the acts. We can't move anything here. I have a motion that I'd like to put forward. I'll read it, and if someone wants to second it, then we can discuss that. It will be calling on the province to take action. Is that acceptable?
Clerk, I believe procedurally that would be quite accurate. So no, go ahead.
Why don't you gotta read it?
Thank you. Whereas the municipality of Kincardine is a proud host community of the Bruce Nuclear Generating Site, where the Bruce Power generates 30% of Ontario's electricity needs, and whereas 2 decades ago, the province of Ontario adopted a property tax assessment model that continues to apply to Ontario's nuclear generation facilities, and whereas the province assessment model includes non-market property valuation for electrical generating properties, and whereas the municipality of Kincardine undertook a study in 2024, which has shown the provincial assessment model is compromising fairness and shifting the tax burden away from electrical industry properties and onto the broader property tax base and within the host community. And whereas the study demonstrated that this is primarily attributable to assessed value of the subject properties being held almost static over several reassessment cycles, resulting from provincially prescribed rules for electricity generating, transmissions, and distribution properties, and where the provincial model results in disparity between the continuously updated market values assigned to the majority of properties and static, non-market-based formula applied to electricity industry properties means that the tax burden shifts onto non-industry taxpayers. Now, therefore be it resolved that the municipality staff be directed to send communication to the Minister of Energy and Electrification, the Minister of Finance, and the local MPP to request the province undertake an immediate review and update the property tax assessment model for Ontario's nuclear generation facilities and other properties within the electricity industry, and copy the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and all other municipalities.
So we have a motion presented by Councillor Kavanaugh. Is there anyone who would offer to second that motion? Councillor Blackwell? Councillor Blackwell? Okay, as the mover, would you, in the discussion, would you like to comment on that, or your position is pretty well stated at this point? Okay, Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you, one of the things I noticed as well is that this doesn't just impact us specifically in this area, it also impacts the county, which impacts then all of the other lower tiers, because they are also having to shoulder in their communities more of the burden that should be going to the county. I'm wondering whether we want to include that within the motion at all. I know that it might be too much, but it might be something that we want to engage. Perhaps maybe it's not in the motion because it's already quite lengthy, but that, you know, I heard a lot of engagement with CANEC and with our MPP. I expect that there's been some conversations with the county, but I think that that would be something that, again, some of our other lower tiers and the county as well may also be engaged in this work to understand that they're getting impacted, obviously not to the extent that we are, but the county as a whole will be negatively impacted by this.
Yeah, so I think that was included in the circulated to all Ontario municipalities. So
yeah,
that would include the ones in Bruce County too. Or follow up, Councillor.
Yes, thank you. Through you, I'm just wondering about a little bit more specific advocacy directly to those, including perhaps some of the elements of the presentation, because they might see it and think that because it's referenced so specifically to host community impact as opposed to county-wide impact that also impacts them.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. I would like to propose a little bit of an addition as a friendly amendment. I know you have all the lists of the big ones, but can we actually send it to Premier Doug Ford too? Would you accept that as, okay, thank you.
I'll accept that as a second.
Councillor Hinchberger.
Sorry, I was just going to inject a little levity here. Your motion writing is taking a leap, and I'm completely impressed at your ability to come up with something like that with wording entirely by yourself. Well done.
I to be clear, I had a lot of help from staff in clarifying that and making sure that it was one of the things I've learned for strategic planning is really the importance, the importance of conferring with staff before you bring the motion to the table.
Counselor Williams, please.
Thank you, through you. I'm not sure if this would be an amendment, but or perhaps a consideration, whether it's for now or at a later time, but there was reference that about 70 communities are affected, and as much as it'd be great for one letter to come from Kincardine, it would be even better if 70 letters came from 70 different municipalities about the need to review and reassess this.
CAO, please.
Through the mayor, when municipalities send out resolutions to all other Ontario municipalities, it's generally a request that if this is something that they similarly want to have addressed by whomever they're resolving, address a matter, if that council deems that appropriate, they'll pass a motion to support that resolution, and then they generally send it back to the municipality that initiated it, and then that municipality can demonstrate, we have a list of this many municipalities that have supported our request. So when I mentioned that we had a meeting and Mr. Fries was part of that in providing information to a number of treasurers in Ontario municipalities that we could see were probably more affected than others. Like as the mayor said, there's, from what we can tell, many municipalities, but there are some that it's a very, very small amount that they'd be impacted by the static valuation, et cetera. But for those that participated, what we shared through the study was that if and when this comes forward to our council and our council puts forward a resolution requesting there be a provincial review, what we would be hoping for is that they have enough information to then advise their council on what the issue is, and that they are then able to inform them and recommend whether or not their council also support that.
So to confirm through you, so the resolution would follow that process by copying all the municipalities.
Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, just to give some more insight, nuclear generation's treated a little different than hydroelectric generation, solar generation. So it's not right across the board. Some of them are treated a little different for tax reasons. Some hydroelectrics actually get cost of living. So it's hard to compare apples to apples all the time, but right, they all probably need to be reviewed, but probably the three municipalities that are really impacted by this, you know, Darlington, Pickering, and ourselves would be all on one common ground for sure.
Okay, we have a motion presented. I'm not going to read it again. All in favor of the motion?
Well done.
Is there anyone opposed? That's carried. Mr. Fries, thank you so much for supporting this debate conversation. Do appreciate it. And you can expect that our staff will be in contact with you again about this.
You do good work.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Very much appreciated. Have a nice evening.
Okay, so we move on to staff reports, Environmental Services Compliance Report, October 2024. And we also have Environmental Services Compliance Report, November 2024. We have our manager, Mark O'Leary, here tonight. This question was raised by Councillor Steinhoff Gray, who is not here tonight, but I'm going to question whether you are aware of the question and can you respond to Councillor Steinhoff Gray's query?
Through you, Mayor Craig, I'm not aware of the question, but if somebody has it, I'll gladly try to answer it.
Okay, short of having Councillor Steinhoff Gray here, we're with council's concurrence, we will defer this until she's present to make sure that the question asked is what the issue is. I think that would be the appropriate path forward. Whether it's tonight or a month, it's not gonna change the question. And we'll, if that's appropriate, we'll do that. Can we just put that on the table, so to speak? Bring it back in the January meeting sometime? That's just, do we need a motion for that? Do we need a motion for that?
We can just put it back.
We'll just put it back on the agenda in the January agenda. Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, since we have Mark here and we have Armo, which is in Ward 2, just maybe you can give us a quick
Just a
little.
minute. No, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, this is the Armo drinking one.
Yeah, I think we just deferred it though.
Are we going to defer the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Sorry, Mark, go away.
they,
We just deferred October.
no, we were actually when I commented on it was both the reports that Mark was going to speak to. So with council's concurrence, I would ask for deferral till Councillor Steinhoff's Gray return in the
No problem.
January meeting,
No problem.
since it was she who raised the question.
Okay.
Well, her question was specific or came out of the October report. The November report is new and not subject to what her concerns were. And I do have a question, maybe two related to the November report.
Okay, November report.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councillor.
It has to do, sorry, thank you. It has to do with the wastewater spill at Bruce Avenue and Penetango Row. And I think, well, it's great that staff noticed that I happened to be on site first and have some really good video of it going down the hill. The question I have in here is, I'm trying to understand in here is, a manhole would go down to the discharge pipe. But there's, I guess the more concerning thing to me is we appear to have an obstruction in the sewage discharge line between the effluent treatment station and the lake, that's between the lake and the manhole, that caused at a higher flow rate a backup of the manhole. So I think the logical question is a concern about our ability to discharge wastewater, and what are we going to do about it?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Craig. So there is a small obstruction on the manhole that you saw bypassing Councillor Hinchberger. So when I say a small, there's a bit of a root buildup where some roots have formed in and around the pipe and can, in theory, I guess, obstruct some flow. I wasn't around the last week of November when this went through the workflow process and onto the council agenda. So one of the other issues that we experienced that day was, as for best practices, it's recommended to lower your lagoon sites through the winter months. The idea being with significant snowfall events and then a spring thaw, that it allows for what I would call a bit of a buffer in your ponds. I do believe the primary reason for the bypass was likely the discharge of the ponds happened too quickly and resulted in a spill at the manhole.
Thank you for that. And then now I would say that this could be rolled in with the October report and brought back when Councillor Steinhoff Gray is present.
So the question from the November Environmental Services Compliance Report has not been answered? Because I think that's just what I heard was that question. Help me out here.
Okay, I'll help you out in here. There are signs here of human performance issues. And that, I think, is the type of discussion that will be happening in the future.
Okay.
Okay.
We're bringing these two reports back for a January meeting. All right. Next, we have the proposed mapping for Bruce County official plan through our development services. And our director, I believe, is online. There he is, Mr. Weiser. So we have a motion here, resolution that council endorse the recommended proposed changes to the county official plan through the proposed mapping updates as contained within Report Development Services 2024-29, and that staff be directed to share the local council endorsement with Bruce County for its consideration. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kavanaugh and Councillor Hinchberger. Manager Dwayne. I'll be you lead off the discussion, please. Well, I'm just giving him a break. I know he's not feeling well, so he's just, and we can't hear you anyways. You're muted or something, so. There, 7 times 13 different ways. Okay, figure out one of the 12 ways, Director.
Feels like deja vu.
Okay.
Someone could do it.
We're gonna start with Dwayne. So away you go, please, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Yes, I'm just getting a hold of Adam's report here now, so I'm going to go through it. I'll try to do my best I can to answer any questions you may have on the proposed mapping expansion, decreased boundaries that the county's proposed. And quick question, is there representation from Jack also?
Okay, so
Sorry.
once again, because this is a big report, are you able to address the first map and we can have questions specific to that first recommendation? And, we'll get consensus that, yeah, that's what we're thinking. And then we'll move on to the next one. We'll just break it down into smaller pieces, please.
That'd be fine, Mayor. If you'd like to pull up the first map, I can speak to it, I think to the
That's the campground.
That's
the Apache campground. It should be.
that might be the zoning, comprehensive zoning map, sorry. You want the,
Yeah, this will be the recommendations regarding expansion, boundary expansions to each one of the particular decreases in each of the areas.
Through you, Mayor Craig, it's Adam here. Can you hear me now?
That's good volume, Adam.
Okay, I've logged in through my phone. I'm having issues with my laptop. So Dwayne, if you want, I can jump in here and take over, or you can keep rolling.
yeah, thanks, Adam. If you have that in front of you, I appreciate
I'm good to
that.
go. Yeah, okay. All right. Thanks, Dwayne. So through you, Mayor Craig, the report that was prepared for council here this evening, essentially, well, I'll back up a second. There's a couple documents that are appended to the report. One is a staff report that was prepared by Jack Van Dorp from the county. Jack is online here this evening if there are questions that council has that would be directed to towards him. Or that he could assist in responding to as well. The other document that is appended to the body of the report is the associated mapping that does correspond with the county official plan and the changes they're looking to consider. So what Jack has done and prepared within that 12-page document is a summary of the proposed mapping considerations and changes for the municipality of Kincardine, and also has associated commentary with each of those, and with that commentary, recommendations on what what both county and municipal staff are suggesting. And so just walking through that, there's a handful of sites associated with the area of Tiverton as one of them. So it's identified as number 3, and there's a few locations within Tiverton that are being considered, whether it be reduction or change of location. There's an area within the urban setting of the town of Kincardine that is being recommended for consideration for a reduction from the settlement area. And then there's a couple others, one that relates to lands up near the BEC Energy Park lands, and then another that would hover around the airport site. So those 2 sites, one is being suggested no change, and that's just related to existing zoning and permitted uses. And then the other around the airport is just at this time suggested that we implement no change, and that's because it's beyond the forecasted land need. And when we look at the land need, that's the municipality as a whole, but then also as we look at how the town of Kincardine is growing to the north, it's leapfrogging a significant amount of lands that kind of hover around the current boundary. And then similar to that, there's another section of land just on the northern kind of limits of the town of Kincardine from a urban boundary and growth perspective that would be just around the Northline extension that isn't necessarily suggested or needed at this time. And then with the last one being at the intersection of Highway 9 and 21. And so with that specific area, just suggestion that it's not necessarily needed at this time. One of the things that I can share through discussion with the county, and Jack would certainly be more well positioned to speak to it, but there have been changes at the provincial level in terms of how the provincial planning statement and changes to official plans are conducted. At one time, it was more stringent in terms of making the one-off changes, and there is a more simplistic approach to that now. So that's a real quick overview, and I'll maybe turn it back to you, Mayor Craig, and then if there's any questions of council, either myself or more than likely Jack will jump in to take those.
All right, so once again, if we go back to the first recommendation, it is the boundary expansion adjustments, the increase and decrease in Tiverton. And any council members have any questions or thoughts about this is the right sort of OP consideration we should have for Tiverton? Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. I know this site quite intimately, the Pine Tree Campground. I am a big supporter of this. This is a great opportunity. Jack, thank you very much for including this. We need to include this in Tiverton. They've gone ahead and put water and sewer, so it's a fully serviceable property now. Plus, there's a huge addition to us. There's 62 sites on this particular property that we're going to probably do, and the owner will do an amendment to change it from a 3-season to 4-season. And those 62 sites will be what we classify as affordable housing. So we get a bonus here and everything else. So I highly recommend that we as a council endorse this piece of property that's called Pine Tree Campground. And I'd like to thank the planners for including that. So are we going to vote on each one of them or endorse them, or how are we going to do this, Mayor Craig?
We'll likely look at each map as a whole, rather, there's a couple of other changes that are proposed for Tiverton as well, so we'll have opportunity to discuss them, and then we'll come back for a consensus sort of thing on each map. Councillor Prenger, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I think this question is going to be for our county planner. Jack, it's a question because I just want some clarification, and this recommended change happens to be an example of what I'm not clear on. But I'm just wondering how the decision to include environmentally protected areas in the expansion to the town boundary is made. My assumption is that the boundaries are changed using property lines, and that is just within that property. But if there's something else going on there, like, because you can't develop those lands, so to me, I'd be like, why wouldn't we just exclude them from being in town and developable in theory? But if it has to go on property lines, then I understand. If you could just clarify, I'd appreciate.
Yeah. Thank you. And through the mayor, the best practice is typically to use the property boundaries to delineate that. We will ultimately, I believe we're doing one last thing, which is just a review around potential MDS considerations. And so it's possible that we may also need to factor that into the settlement area boundary as MDS setbacks are calculated from the boundary of the settlement area. So if there is a conflict, there may be a need to review that in this area. But generally, the best practice is to follow the limits of the property boundaries where they make sense to do so.
Thanks. Just to follow up through the mayor, understanding that and agreeing that seems reasonable in most cases. I my personal preference, and I don't know what other councilors would think on this, would be to, it's a very significantly large area of environmental hazard. My preference would be that it would be excluded from the town boundaries. Thank you.
Further questions? So I don't have a background in planning, but it makes, I would offer that I would prefer, it would seems logical to me to go by boundary lines and then use the mapping to exclude development on that piece. The environmental protected land is identified, and the county planners, I'm thinking, will say, no, you can't put houses on there, depending, or using the expertise of Saugeen Valley. So from my perspective, the recommendation regarding that particular spot is the way that it should be. There are also a couple of recommended changes on the northeast corner. There's a spot there that is recommended for removal, and another additional spot right up in the top right corner there. So any further questions regarding this recommended changes? Question, Councillor?
Sorry, thank you through you, Chair. I believe the discussion and recommendations for the other changes are on a separate map, and there's details that follow on the bottom page to go along with those. So, not that, I mean, for this specific example is the exact same map, but the wording at the top has a different recommendation and it has a description of what we're looking at. So it, I need clarification on the big, which isn't this one, I think, in Southwest. Okay, sorry. Yes, it might actually be this one. The larger square of the, what looks like black hatching beside the campground that we just, no, Southwest. Yeah, that I don't know what we're doing with it. Is it being recommended to be added or
Yes.
approved?
That is being recommended to be added. The northeast corner, there's two plots there that are recommended to be removed.
Mm-hmm.
And right in the very top northeast corner, there's a little purple hatching that is being requested to be added.
Thank you for the clarification. The use of
took
the
me a
hatching were different, are used in different ways, and it's very confusing.
Took me a while to be explained what we're talking about. So there, we need some direction forward. This is the recommendation from county. Is this the recommendation that council would endorse, or would you like to see a change? All in straw vote. The whole thing. The whole Tiverton. Pardon me?
You're gonna approve this again.
We'll see how they vote.
By vote, right?
This is it. This is not a motion. This is a straw vote. We're looking at whether we can endorse this recommendation piece by piece. All straw vote in favor of the recommendation for Tiverton. Okay, there we go. Let's
She's just asking a procedural question, but
Oh,
we're
I'm
gonna do
sorry.
it at the end.
We're not.
we already have a motion to endorse the recommended proposed change. So when we get to the end, we will have already understood the changes that we agree with or the changes we would like to amend. So this was just a first straw vote on the first proposal. Second map that we are looking at is number 5, Kincardine Southeast. That was let our manager talk about that, or our director, if you'd like to speak to this one.
Yeah, I can.
Or Jack, yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in here to start through you, Mayor Craig. So this parcel of land is just off of the south line. So you'd be in the southeastern quadrant of the town of Kincardine. The land is, it'll take some work to service. Topography of the challenge. The other element to this is that the current landowner has the desire to continue and maintain agriculture practices. So those factors led to some discussion amongst Kincardine staff and county staff. And then Jack may want to touch on the overall kind of complement of need in terms of development ready lands for the municipality. But it is in excess of what is needed, is my understanding as well.
So it's kind of the farmer is a generational farm and they're not interested in developing. And there's no benefit leaving it on as development land. Anyone opposed to the idea of taking it off the, well, I'm sorry, what's the recommendation? Decrease?
Reduce it.
Approve reduction of settlement area. Anyone opposed to that? Okay. You just gave endorsement to that recommendation. The next one is number 20. Kincardine east of Bruce Energy Center. The recommendation is no change. There was a request from the landowner to expand that. Is there any recommendation from county or from our director regarding this recommendation? Jack, Adam, any comment?
Our understanding is that this is not a necessary change. The designation wouldn't affect the ability of the landowner to enact the permitted uses. And so it was not seen as a need. And our understanding is the landowner is also, understanding of that and doesn't need to see this, isn't actively pursuing this change.
Any comment about straw vote to endorse the recommendation that there's no change? Okay, moving on. Next one is number 21. Kincardine adjacent to airport. The recommendation is no change beyond forecast land need. Jack or Adam, please.
Sure, I can, through you, Mayor. So this is a proposal that was initiated or requested by the landowner, identifying an opportunity for what we understand to be a kind of airport residential village function. Staff did review. The growth forecast indicates that there is a surplus of residential land within Kincardine's urban areas for the horizon of the plan. And there are also areas within Kincardine's plan that currently do not have a function assigned. So they're in the settlement area and they're designated for future development. So that it hasn't been assigned if that's residential or other. So with that, we think there is a sufficient supply of land and there is not a need to expand the settlement area in this location. And Director Weiser already previously noted this evening that it would be somewhat discontiguous from the Kincardine primary urban area. So this would be an extension to the Lakeshore secondary urban area, but a bit discontinuous and leapfrogging properties between the airport and the primary urban area.
Councillor Stewart, please.
I agree. It's definitely not primary, but are we going to talk about the secondary urban community? Because you're talking about this maybe attaching down the road to a second urban community, and most of us councillors got an incredible amount of emails. So I think we probably should put that on the agenda if you don't mind, Jack. But I agree with you. This one is a little bit premature. All I want to be as careful is that, when we start talking about official plans, Jack, and how long they take to do. So you and Adam don't feel this is going to be part in the next 10 to 15 years, because that's what it's really going to be before we have another review. And my fellow councillors and I will probably be doing other things, but that's how long these things take. And a lot of council never sees an official plan. And I believe, aren't we about 14 years since the last one that we did in county? That was 2010. So I just want to make sure the council understands that this wouldn't be included either in the secondary or the primary, maybe for another 14 years or 10 years. So anyways, just wanted to add that on.
Can you just clarify some of the changes in the provincial policy statement about amendments to the official plan, please, Jack?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor Craig. So historically, the provincial planning statement has directed that settlement area boundaries be contemplated only in the context of a comprehensive review. That is a land needs assessment for a long period of time. And what is the supply of land? What is the demand for land? Is there a land budget that works? And all of that predicated on what's called a regional market area, in our case being the county. The new provincial planning statement has provided significantly greater flexibility, providing that boundary adjustments or expansions can be undertaken at any time, and providing a range of criteria, including some review of land supply and demand. But these are all considerations. There is no strict requirement under the provincial planning statement that a need be demonstrated and that all of the criteria be fully met. The planning statement requires consideration of a number of criteria. So that does provide significantly greater flexibility for municipalities if they find that growth is outpacing their supply or their forecast at a considerable rate, such that they may be running short. It also provides significantly more opportunities for developers to advance proposals. And so what we have been trying to do through the county process is examine the function of our county plan exercise being to make sure that at a county scale and at the scale of our individual communities, we do have the lands to meet the growth needs, while also recognizing that landowners may pursue individual applications at times of their own choosing, and striving to put forward a policy framework in the county plan that does seek to balance a bit of that sort of opportunity that's given to those developers when they're advancing proposals, and make sure that the county and the local municipalities have an opportunity to direct that growth to where it would best fit the communities themselves.
Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you, my experience as a planner is playing SimCity and building cities. So I recognize that this is much more complex. One of the challenges for me is, there's a reference to us having adequate residential planned development land. Within the context of how planning works in Ontario, obviously it's up to developers whether they want to move forward with those projects. At what point is there any consideration given to if a developer is saying, I'm willing to put shovels in the ground, but I'm potentially outside the settlement boundary, and we're saying, well, we still have all this other land that would make better sense from a planning perspective, but also recognizing that we want to continue to grow and that we need to have housing. I'm just wondering, when we say, yeah, we have plenty of land, if no one's willing to move on that land, how does that factor into the consideration?
Thank you. And through the mayor, I would observe that we do have in Kincardine a fair bit of shovels currently in the ground on a range of projects. We do recognize that there are some challenging areas where we have land supply that has not historically proceeded. The Planning Act and the additional tools offered do provide municipalities the flexibility to consider these changes to boundaries at times of need. And so I would say there is flexibility through these changes in the provincial planning statement. The staff review is that that flexibility does not need to be, we don't need to, we can use that flexibility if we need it. We don't need to advance this boundary adjustment at this time in the context of the county-wide growth forecast and the forecast as it relates to growth identified for Kincardine. I'm not sure if that came through all right.
Yeah, we're just talking procedure here for a minute, Jack. Okay. So the proposal that we have, on this, what number is this? 21. So the recommendation is no change. Is there council consensus that that is the recommendation we will endorse? Well, I saw 3 hands. Okay, there we go. All right. Map number 22, next one, which is Kincardine north of Northline Extension, and the recommendation is not yet. It's beyond the forecasted land need. Any questions regarding this piece of property? Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I feel a little differently about this one. One, it looks like it was a staff request. 2, it's immediately adjacent to the current primary urban community. I guess I'd like somebody to explain to me, maybe from Bruce County Planning, what would be the downside if you slightly extended yourself a little early? And then the second 2-part, if I could, if that were added, and say that with the road allowance that is referred to as the North Line extension that goes all the way over to the B line, would that be inside that settlement area or outside that settlement area? Or that proposed addition?
Okay. Thank you. I will just I'll have to look a little bit, zoomed into the map around the status of the North Line extension relative to the current settlement area. I think the thickness of the dashed line would be too broad in the PDF to indicate that. Perhaps if someone is in a position to look that up, I'll take a turn at the first question around the relative benefits or risks. And so what this shows as a municipality request. I would say perhaps the way we were framing these is county and municipal staff together were exploring different possibilities as we were looking at different potential scenarios for what we might look at. Are there broader scale adjustments, including potential reductions or expansions that we should be contemplating? And so in the context of that, we saw that this could be an opportunity to sort of rationalize settlement area boundaries around areas where we anticipate growth. In terms of the plus sides of including it a bit early, as described, are that it would provide a little more opportunity for coordinating infrastructure planning and design. It would give the municipality a bit of a broader kind of service area to explore as a neighborhood for Kincardine. And the sort of the downsides are that this is a high quality agricultural land. And so taking it out of agricultural production or designating it away from agricultural production would encourage it to be, facilitate that it's going to come out of that, be lost to that purpose. And it could also lead to some lower effort or pressure in encouraging infilling and intensification, in a sense that there is an ample supply of land, and so that could ultimately yield lower intensities of development or densities of development, and have greater transportation associated infrastructure needs and servicing costs with that lower density of development. So I would say we haven't done a full workup on the agricultural impact assessment part of expanding the settlement area into this piece as a straight up expansion. That would be something we would look to explore if council did want to advance this proposal.
Thank you, Jack. Just the follow-up would be, the report notes that, it looks like over the forecast time frame, we're not constrained residentially, which if I going by memory is based on Ministry of Finance population projections, but is noted that we are expected to become constrained regarding employment lands. That's correct, is it not?
So the growth forecast did find that Kincardin's primary urban area is forecast to be short on employment lands. And some of that is based on assumptions for how the area within the local official plan that's designated for business park uses, but allows mixed uses, some assumptions around how that development may occur. So if there's a higher mix of residential in the mixed use component of the business park, then the ability of the business park to accommodate employment needs would be reduced, and the municipality would run short on employment lands. So that's kind of in the mix of that forecast. Identifying a potential shortage is based on a higher residential share in employment areas or in that business park area. And we did note maybe earlier in an opportunity to raise now, Director Weiser noted that the area in the southeast quadrant that we discussed removal is one of those areas within Kincardine, and the lands to the west of it are also lands that currently do not have a function assigned in the official plan, so they're future development lands. So those lands could be assigned a function, for example, an employment function, and help to meet that shortfall if it were to occur.
Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you, I recognize the value of agricultural to our community. I'm curious though, like designating this as part of the official plan, if that's what's chosen, doesn't necessarily change the use until the landowner decides that they want to change the use. Is that correct? So with that in mind, there's realistically two ways and two places where we can grow. One is to the east and the other is to the north. So I don't have I guess my preference would be to include this within our official plan or in the official plan. I think it's part of also forecasting where we're going to go to the community where we have the option to grow. We obviously can't go west or south. So for me, this seems like a better path to grow towards than to potentially be going further east in terms of our agricultural community that way. So I would be supportive actually of making a recommendation that this is something. I wouldn't support the recommendation as written. I would support it actually being included.
Hey, we've had discussion about this recommendation, which is not yet. Are we in support of the recommendation of not yet, or would we prefer now? Yeti. Well, we will support the recommendation. All in favor of not including this in the urban settlement area? Everyone opposed to the recommendation? So it would appear that we are in support of including this this property north of the North Line extension as part of the municipal endorsement. Moving on to the next map, which is lands to the east of Highway 21 on Highway 9. Jack or Adam, please.
I can go. Thank you. So this is an area that we, again, looking at if we do anticipate a potential shortfall of employment lands, could this be an area that could be brought in as employment lands? So we started to explore it. The conclusion we've recommended here is not yet. And the idea is we would suggest an area-specific application, so use that new planning statement flexibility when there's additional details available. And part of that would be that it would give an opportunity to review and address considerations, including servicing cost and access to Highway 9 as important provincial conversations, and not try to have those conversations while we're also trying to conclude the overall official plan exercise. but to be able to focus those on an area specific application when the time is right in terms of that material being advanced and developed.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I would agree. We actually have two large pieces of employment area already behind No Frills and Sobeys. So maybe I would probably hold off on this one, not yet, see if we can get those other two sort of developed in. Because they're in the primary area. So my recommendation is I would agree, not yet.
Further comment? Councillor Hinchberger?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. All other things being equal, I would say not yet. And I acknowledge that we have certain employment lands or slated for development that have been slated for development for quite some time. And I can't help trying to look into the crystal ball and seek ways to break what could appear to be a log jam. So I'm kind of 50-50 on this one.
I am more 60-40, as in not agreeing with the recommendation. I think the municipality itself needs to be involved in the development of some of the properties to spur those employment lands. The folks in our planning and infrastructure and development will tell you the number of calls. Do you have space? Do you have place? Do you have something? And the answer is no. And the availability of municipal land to spur development is an important thing. So I likely need some advice. Jack has spoken clearly of the, what do you do first? You do this and this and this, or do that and that and that. And I want to, I need some assurance that if this is a piece of property that the municipality would like to encourage its development, that we're not hindered in or held up by process. So Jack, if you could help me out, if there's a speedier path forward, is it to support the recommendation and get all the detail behind, or is it to not support the recommendation, have the official plan include this piece of property and then do the details later? Is there a more expedient way to move forward with this?
Yeah, our staff recommendation is that the best approach for this property, and that may also be the fastest, ultimately would be to have focused conversations on it, external to the overall OP process, and advance it as an area-specific proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Branger? Yep.
Thank you, through your chair. For this particular property, Jack, was the property owner consulted, or did they provide comments when they found out about this? And are you able to share what their stance, like do they want it developed, or are they more on the side of the one that was southeast?
So we did.
Sorry.
Thank you. Through the mayor, we did meet with the landowner. They did express an interest in being perhaps framing part of the employment lands supply for the municipality. There would be, some conversations to continue with them. This is another area where we would need to, regardless of if it was in the county OP update exercise or a standalone project, does need to address the proximity to the existing livestock facility on the property. That doesn't change, but we have an opportunity to focus on that specifically through an area specific process and give it the time and attention that it would need, perhaps in a more clear and more timely fashion than we might if we're doing it through the county OP comprehensive project.
Thank you for that detail.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Actually, it's more of a comment. I know sometimes we can get blurred by thinking 921 Business Park and stuff like that. But we're essentially looking at what is a 921 Business Park sort of thing. And we already invested quite a bit of money that we're going to pay a loan on a number of years ago to install the Durham Street extension, which angles over directly towards that property. So I think as this discussion is going on, I'm probably in the 60-40 or more category now, along with the mayor.
Problem is my 60 got switched the other way because my question was, how do we go about it the quickest way to succeed with the employment land? And the recommendation from our county planner is if we follow this recommendation, it would facilitate the quickest way to achieve the development of that land.
If this makes any sense at all, there, like we've talked about, and somebody was here once, and I think we might have went to a certain place where they talk about the importance for council to signal intentions. And I look at this in here, and I get that there's two ways you could get to it. One is the landowner approaches and makes a request. Yet, in order for them to do that, they're going to run the whole risk that they'll run into challenges either at the county or at the lower tier municipality and hit a roadblock. Whereas you go at it the other way, the one that you're signaling council's intent. And one thing I would say is, like, aside from, say, if the landowners right now watching this meeting tonight, if the way we record things, unless they were to watch the meeting, if you vote to support the recommendation, there would be very little of that message largely would be lost about how seriously some members of council were actually considering making this change at our end, not initiated at the other end. Thanks.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. Just to expand a little more on this, if we decide to not include this, not yet, doesn't mean the landlord can't, or the owner of the property can't go ahead. I mean, it's just amendment to the official plan. It takes a little time and everything, but we don't handcuff the owner of the property completely. We're just sort of saying to the owner, saying, not this round, maybe next round. Thank you.
Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, through you. Similar, I think, as Councillor Hinchberger's thought process. I'm also thinking the more land that we signal that is potentially available for growth by more landowners helps us to have more land available for potential development. And I know that there's challenges with some of the land being developed now. And so I'm kind of the view right now that the more that appears to be available, the better position we might be in to support growth.
Further comments? Okay, so there's a recommendation regarding this piece of property, not yet. All in favor of not yet? All opposed to not yet? And that was defeated. Councillor Stewart, please.
I think it's prudent, since we're talking about land and we're talking about official plans, and I'm not quite sure why this wasn't added on. Most of us around the table probably received anywhere from 20 to 100. We need to talk about the designation along the lake shore and what really happened, just to give you some background, and Dwayne will be able to back me up on this, is that when we completed our official plan in 2021, and that was the Kincardine Lakeshore official plan, we didn't have that area designated particularly for a secondary urban development or designation. And, you know, it went to county and got approved, but it turned out that we found out when someone was asking for a subdivision, that was noted on the subdivision that it was a secondary sort of planned development area. And the problem is that it was both Dwayne and I said, what the heck? But when we look back at the plans for the, Jackie will tell you, in 2010, it was designated, but somehow it got missed in our plans. So, seems to be a huge, I mean, more than any one of these other sort of type of designations, this one needs to be at least talked about, I think, tonight, about the secondary plan for the lake shore. I know that a lot of the people that I've talked to and a lot of people have sent both us and everybody letters that they would like this designation moved down to a hamlet designation, mainly because this area doesn't really qualify as a secondary plan. I think way back in 2010, it was going to be a secondary plan with all the necessary infrastructures, like the sewer and the water and everything, but that really didn't take place. There's only really one commercial place on the whole area, and it's a store over in Inverhuron on Albert Street. It's a fish and chip store. So it doesn't really define this definition of a secondary urban designation. And I'd highly recommend that we have a review of it. I know you're going to go to county council and get your plans eventually approved, but I think we need to take a look at this and maybe reduce it down to a hamlet, still allowing development, but not maybe quite at the intensity that a secondary plan would bring to the table. And one of the problems with the secondary plan is that, when we did this back in 2010, the county did it, we didn't have the PPS there. And the PPS I think it started in 2014. And the provincial planning statement really allows very high density development, which really doesn't fit into the whole geographical area. And looking at our proposed compensation plan, most of this area now, Jack, is going to be rezoned or zoned to EP, which doesn't really allow any development at all. So I'm a little bit confused where we're going to sit on this, but we have quite a large, and actually, if it wasn't seasonal in winter, you'd probably fill up the gallery with people tonight. But I really do think that we need to, as a council, represent the people and at least endorse it one way or the other. And my endorsement on that particular property would move it from a secondary plan to a hamlet designation. Thank you.
Well spoken, Councillor Stewart. A couple of procedural challenges because there's no recommendation, like there's no report or anything. So that conversation is not even on the agenda this evening. So I can inform you that the comments of that we have all received have been included in the file with our planning department. I can confirm that county and municipal staff are going to be having a future conversation this coming week to address those issues. And, the flexibility that Director Van Dorp talked about that lies within the provincial policy statement, where you don't have to wait for another 14 years to make that official plan. Regardless of what the official plan is done at this point, the conversation about the land use in Inverhuron is not done. It is not done. There is opportunity for council to address that. So thank you for the comments, but we're not going to be addressing the Inverhuron OP requests at this meeting tonight. So we're actually going to move on. Oh, we have the couple of questions. One from Councillor Pranger.
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. And it's related, but it's directly related to Mr. Van Dorp's report. So I just have a question for Jack. In your report, you state that staff completed a review of 33 settlement boundary area adjustment requests. Did any of those 33 include a request about Inverhuron or the lakeshore and a change to that?
Thank you. And through the mayor, the requests that we've received with respect to Inverhuron are not within the package that we had reviewed prior for the report that was attached to your agenda this evening that we presented to County Council on November 21st. It is material that we've received subsequent to the analysis that we were undertaking at that time. So it would be a matter that we would address in a follow-up report to Bruce County Council. And as your mayor has indicated, we'll have a meeting with staff, meeting with Kincardine staff and folks in that area shortly.
Great, thank you. And in that case, I am absolutely aligned with the mayor's approach. Thank you.
Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you, through you. I think this might be rehashing that question, but I committed to ask it. If we endorse the proposals presented to us tonight, it doesn't prohibit us from discussing or making other recommendations in the future. This process is continuing and we aren't giving tacit approval to everything as it is. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, what we were seeking this evening was council's resolutions with respect to the adjustments that we'd identified and reviewed in the material we provided to you this evening.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. I have two questions. One to Adam. I'd like to know why you didn't include some sort of review of the secondary designation at Inverhuron. It seems to be the only one that really got a lot of attention. Maybe I can ask why you didn't. And one for Jack. When do you think this official plan is going to come to council for review or approval? Thank you.
So thank you, through you, Mayor Craig. So I think it's key to note, and not hanging this towards the county, but this is a county official plan review, Councillor Stewart. So any of the discussions that we've had as a group have been led by the county. We've been working with them. I do know that there has been a number of comments that have come in over the past day or so here related to this. I haven't necessarily been privy to anything prior to that, but as the mayor has indicated, we are committed to taking a review of that, and there is a process that lies ahead still for the official plan update for the county. So Jack, I don't know if you have any other comments around that. I just know that it hasn't really been something that has been a part of discussion. I mean, historically, the Lakeshore area has been part of past plans. We've had proposed infrastructure upgrades, opportunities that have gone by the wayside with that, and there's been other development proposals that have actively been pursued, along that area. So I don't know if there has been a driver beyond that it has necessitated a need to look at it, but I do know that we are going to have a review of it here in the near future. But Jack, I'll maybe turn it over to you if you've got anything else to add.
Thank you, Director Weiser, and through the mayor. When we were scoping and working with staff to pull together the report for this evening, our focus was on the maps that we had presented to you earlier this fall, and so we saw that as the scope that we were aiming for, appreciating that there is an interest in this area of Inverhuron and its designation. We will review that and return with some further material regarding that suggested change that we've received from the community. In terms of the timing, so we are continuing to work to bring the plan forward. So we intend to present a report to County Council next week, providing an update around the engagement that we've had thus far through the fall, and then also noting that we do anticipate some further comments from municipalities that would be incorporated into the work that we're doing before we prepare a final draft. And then when we have a final draft prepared, that would be subject to circulation, an open house, and a public meeting. So there is still opportunities for engagement and comments before it comes to County Council for an ultimate decision on adoption.
Very good. So we have a motion on the floor that council endorse the amended proposed changes to the county official plan through the proposed mapping updates as contained within the report, and that staff be directed to share the local council endorsement which includes the amendment except for number 22, Kincardine north of North Line Extension. And also amended except for number 23, Kincardine east of Highway 9 and 21. So those were the two amendments that we made to the recommendations from county staff. It's moved and seconded. All in favor? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. All right, so now we need a mover and seconder. The council agree to move agenda item 9.0, move into closed session, and when complete, return to finish the open meeting agenda. Moved by Councillor Blackwell and Kavanaugh. Okay, so I'm going to that. All right, so we need a mover and seconder. The council move into closed session for the purpose pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act is amended for the purpose of considering the closed session minutes dated November 25th and November 27th, and for the security of the property of the municipality or local board, IT infrastructure and security assessment, and further the council return to regular open meeting. Yep, so we are remaining in a Zoom meeting here, so so we need a mover and seconder that we go into closed